I drink your milkshake. I drink it up!
Brent Johnson, we're back here, my friend. Episode 3 of Milkshakes Markets Madness show. Everyone needs to understand, including myself, that this is not a podcast. It's been an interesting week, plenty of madness. Anything on the top of your mind before I start running through some of the crazy stuff we've seen?
Well, I mean, there's been plenty of it, so we'll just start wherever you want, and we'll just go on through it. But I'm happy everybody's tuning in. We're looking forward to you doing so on a weekly basis, and here we go.
Yeah, we'll keep making the show better. Our goal is to improve audio, video, experience, the whole thing. So bear with us as we learn, and we're grateful to have you on the ride. Yeah, I think I don't know how we would describe our politics. I don't think we really fit into any particular category, but there's definitely a political conversation we had around this prisoner swap between Brittney Griner for the Merchant of Death, Victor Bout. I mean, it's almost silly, right? Like, I still can't get my head around this. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, I've actually read Victor's book, or the book that was written on him. I read it, 10 or 15 years ago when it first came out. And then Nicolas Cage made a movie, or it starred in the movie that was kind of based on him. So I've kind of followed this story for quite a while. And I know that over the years, there's been a couple different proposals, to do these prisoner swaps. And there's been, a couple military people, a couple, I think just traditional spies that were proposed and just could never get it off. And so I kind of feel really conflicted on it, to be really honest. Like, I don't think it was a equitable deal. Right. But I am glad that Brittney Griner's home. I mean, anytime an American is thrown in a prison overseas, I think, for what I believe was a relatively minor offense, I don't want that person to spend the rest of their life in a Russian gulag. That said, I don't think that it was necessarily the greatest deal ever, if that makes any sense. I think, it's hard to play politics with people's lives, but it just seems like they got the better end of this deal than we did. Now, I'm sure Brittney Griner's family doesn't feel that way, but I do think that the gentleman who's still in Russian prison and has been there for a long time, I'm sure his family feels that way. So I don't know. What are you thinking? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I get where your stance is. I'm not really as politically correct about it. I think it was a complete ripoff. I mean, I don't know enough about her personally, but I don't think it really matters. I mean, we dealt one of the biggest cards we've had in terms of the relationship we had with Russia, and he's a very, his legend and his reputation speaks for itself. Brittney Griner, maybe she comes home and plays basketball again. Does anyone really care? Like, this guy's going to go right back to causing trouble around the world.
Well, I certainly hope if she does go back to playing basketball. And listen, I kind of have mixed feelings on the national anthem and saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll fully admit this, but if she goes back to playing basketball, I hope that she stands for the national anthem, and I hope she puts her hand over her heart, and I hope she's grateful for what the country did for her, because it's my understanding that she did not do that prior to this, and so I think that's what some people have a hard time with. So, it's one thing if you're going to stand up for your beliefs, but if you're going to stand up for them, stand up for them.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know the full story because I'm not spending that much time unearthing every detail, but the offense may have been minor in the eyes of certain people, but from what I understand, she broke the law. It's not like they just detained her because she was an African American or an American. Yeah. Some erroneous things. So to me, it doesn't sit well at all, and I think it was purely politics. And whether it's you're Republican or Democrat, when administrations make these types of moves with the attempt of, like, really the mathematics there was how many votes can we win? She's a woman. She's, of a ethnic minority, so to speak. There's so many aspects to that was politically motivated. And I think that type of garbage that goes on is why, personally myself, I'm so jaded about politics here, because it's not about the people. It's not about the country. It's about just like continually like winning this like stupid backyard, fight with each other.
Well, to be honest, the biggest problem I have with it is not even so much her coming home. Again, I'm glad she's home, but if I really got down to it, the thing that upsets me the most is the number of people that are in prison in the United States for the exact same offense. And Kamala Harris, who's the vice president, put them there. Right. And so she's heralding bringing Brittney Griner home for this minor offense, but she actually prosecuted people and put them in jail for similar offenses. So, it's a lot of I think we'd agree that the hypocrisy is that drives us the most crazy.
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of why people can't stomach it, because not only was it hypocritical on so many levels, like the one you just mentioned, but the trade was garbage. And it wasn't like, we're not even splitting hairs here. I mean, to Russia, she's irrelevant in terms of geopolitics outside of being this like great bargaining chip that they just cashed in. For us, I mean, he's an arms dealer and he's responsible for all kinds of stuff that's going on around the world. And I think the U.S. has blood on its hand of its own, but still, it's like, at least, we can pretend to be altruistic. This guy's just out there looking to cause chaos. And so not to harp on it any longer. It was just such a, like,
just one piece of the madness. Just one piece of the madness.
Yeah, it was one piece of the madness. We'll come back to some other madness that's market related when we get to that kind of section. Let's kind of stay in a realm that's a little more off markets for the time being. We started talking about the World Cup last week, and we had the quarterfinals. Actually, I think we had both semifinals and quarterfinals. Can't remember exactly, but now here we are in the finals, and we have France versus Argentina. What are your thoughts on that match?
Well, I think it's going to be a great match. And first, I loved watching England versus France, and I have full disclosure, I wanted England to win. I thought it was pretty amazing that Harry Kane, who's the leading goal scorer in history for England, is the guy that missed the penalty kick that could have put it into overtime to go into extra time. And so it's, on the one hand, you can't. How do you be mad at the guy who's your leading scorer of all time? But then on the other hand, he missed the penalty kick. So it's been a crazy World Cup. Morocco made it all the way to the semifinals, first African country to do that, which was pretty cool to see. But now I think we have kind of a classic matchup: Europe versus South America. Messi, I think this is like the one title he doesn't have. He doesn't have a World Cup yet.
Right.
And I know until he gets a World Cup, they will always say that Maradona was better than Messi. And of course, everybody who's young thinks Messi is the best. Everybody who's old thinks Maradona is the best. And so I think if Messi could get a World Cup here, that would obviously help his argument.
Well, sports fans love a good GOAT debate. So yeah. I think it, we're not big soccer football fanatics in the United States. So at least this gives us a narrative that we can follow, and it gives us a little bit of excitement, since as a country we're not in it, and a lot of these other players don't really mean as much. But I think Messi is like the LeBron James of international football, and I think. Well, I
think he's leaving Barcelona to come play for David Beckham's team in Miami. I think I read that. I might have that wrong, so I'm sure all the soccer fans, world soccer fans out there, will email me if I have this wrong. But that's what I understand.
Well, it's been interesting watching this American Soccer League, whatever it's called, kind of gain momentum. I'm from Philadelphia, and it's a sports obsessed city, and we've had a really good fall. The Phillies were in the World Series. I believe the Philadelphia soccer team went to the championship or was in that tournament. And now the Eagles are 12-1 and an absolute powerhouse, the first NFL team to clinch a playoff berth. But with all that momentum going on at the time when the Phillies were in the playoffs, you had the Eagles 8-0. And for the soccer team to even be mentioned in that kind of excitement and momentum was interesting. I can only imagine the cope that would exist if all these international superstars started coming to the United States to play in the American Football League of some kind.
Hey, well, before I forget, while we're on this topic, you tweeted out something the other day. What if the global reserve currency was determined by the World Cup champion? I mean, that would make for a pretty interesting world. It would make for a very mad world, considering Argentina could actually have the global reserve currency if that happened. And then somebody else tweeted out that the U.S. isn't going to lose the world reserve currency until they start caring about soccer. To which I said, well, then we're never going to lose the global reserve currency.
Right.
We just don't care.
Right. Those are two very, very fun thought experiments in the context of milkshakes. So why not, at this point, just kind of jump into some of the stuff that's gone on in the market. Before we get too granular, let's talk about the FOMC. So the Fed yesterday had their rate decision, 50 basis points. Did you see anything in terms of the press conference, the dot plot, some of the commentary that you want to extrapolate on?
Well, I think the thing that's been most interesting for me, and I've said this several times this year, and I continue to say it, like Powell has been the most clearly spoken Fed chair that I can remember. He's been very clear about what he intends to do and how he intends to do it. So, again, you may disagree with him. You may think he's wrong. You may think he's lying, but there's no misunderstanding what he's saying the plan is, right? And so I think he has been very hawkish all year. And I think he remains very hawkish. And I think if you just read the statements every time they had a meeting, rather than watching him on TV, I think there, initially the markets, took the last couple times he spoke as dovish, and initially yesterday they took it as dovish. Now today the market's down big today. I think they're realizing he was more hawkish than the impression. But I will admit that the change in tone and his body language between the press conference at the November meeting, and then when he spoke again at the end of November, and then when he spoke yesterday, while he still maintained his hawkish comments, there's no question in my mind that his body language was different. The tone of his voice was different. So even though the things he was saying was hawkish, his tone, in my opinion, had definitely softened. And so I'm not sure quite what to make of that. But the reality is they have now hiked 450 basis points this year. I mean, nobody thought that he was going to be able to do that, right? And those who thought that if he did do that, that he would absolutely crush the market. And while the market's down, it hasn't totally blown up yet. So, in some ways, you got to give him credit. He's got a lot of space now where he can use the cushion to ease if he needs to ease. But I continued. I actually sent something out last night that all the confusion and drama and euphoria that's gone in Q4 is going to be replaced by clarity and pain come April, because I think by then this market's going to the lag effect of all the rate hikes is going to start to show up in the market. So I think Q1, we're going to see a lot of madness in late Q1, early Q2.
Well, to your point about people reading into press conferences are tricky. And I think investors, pundits, we kind of oftentimes have our bias or our mind already made up. And so we're just fishing for, a little stutter or somewhat of a dovish vocabulary word. And like you're saying, I think Powell has been much more transparent, and oftentimes just straight up admits like we don't know what we're doing, not in that exact way, but says like we can't predict recessions and we don't know what's going to happen. And that's, to me, it's a shocking honesty where, they typically, the Fed's kind of main mechanism is pretending to be this Wizard of Oz and getting markets to follow along, like the tail wagging the dog type of environment. But the focusing on every little word, I feel like, is a bit of like a Bernanke PTSD, right? Like the whole taper tantrum thing was something that caught everyone off guard because we weren't paying attention enough to what Bernanke was saying. The Fed minutes weren't necessarily spelling it out as clearly either. And then all of a sudden they start tapering and the market freaks out. So now I think people are over attuned to what they're doing, and head scratches and throat clearing. And but it still feels like in the markets, combing through Twitter and having these debates and conversations, that everyone is so on this bullet train, which great movie, by the way. We'll have to talk about that. Oh, yeah. But everybody is on this bullet train that rate cuts and QE is right around the corner. And it feels to me like, and this is just a narrative in my head, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. How can we kill inflation if everybody is 3 steps ahead on the next move of QE?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And every time the market front runs, the pivot or front runs the switch to QE, it gives him more ammo to just keep hiking. And I was reminded at one point during the press conference yesterday, I was reminded of a flight that I was taking one time. And I don't remember what happened, but I remember I got kicked off this flight. But I had a ticket, I had a seat, but for whatever, I don't remember what happened, but I remember being at the counter And I kept arguing with the lady behind the counter. And I kept saying it a different way and a different way. And finally she said, you can keep asking me the same question 10 different ways, but the same answers that you are not getting on this flight. And that's kind of how I felt it was yesterday. Like every questioner kept trying to get Powell to be dovish. And they kept asking the same question in a different way over and over and over. And he kept giving the same answer. And so maybe that's what happened overnight. Maybe people overnight kind of finally realized, his answer actually wasn't dovish. So anyway, it's, how this eventually plays out. I think it's going to end out painfully, but, we'll have to wait and see.
I can't imagine the milkshake man being stubborn. That just doesn't translate. I could never visualize that.
It was a very friendly conversation, John.
No, you're always friendly. It just doesn't mean that you give anyone an inch. So one of the things I love about your interactions on Twitter for the longest time, it's kind of been like your hashtag, your brand is, well, besides, we highlighted some haters, which we're going to do here maybe first before we get into this, but it's kind of like a nod or a hat tilt to some of the craziness that goes on Twitter, the madness. You'd always use this hashtag, people are losing their minds. So why not introduce a segment? We've kind of have our haters, but this is slightly different because sometimes, it's hate directed towards you and the dollar milkshake is one thing, but people just being completely off their rockers another.
Oh yeah. I mean, listen, Twitter is a madhouse, and it's so ridiculous in so many ways, and people take it so seriously in so many ways. And listen, I'm a guy, I'm all for having these Twitter spats and debates. I once debated publicly on Twitter with a client over 2 days. So I'm not against the debate, right? But, if you're going to have these debates and if you're going to throw zingers out and if you're going to talk trash, then you have to be willing to take it when it goes the other way a little bit. And, I'm not going to get into mentioning names right now because it just isn't necessary. But if you get into a Twitter spat and you get upset and then you go and you hire a private investigator to figure out who the guy is that you're in your Twitter spat with, and you then announce on Twitter or your TV show the road on which he lives, and you mention his father, and then you post a picture of his wife, I think it's fair to say that you've lost your mind. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous on so many levels. But anyway, we'll just leave that. That is the greatest show of madness that I have seen this week. And furthermore, and then to portray yourself as the victim. Like if you don't think posting a picture of somebody else's wife on Twitter is crossing the line, then you're just hopeless. I mean, that's just it. And I will die on that hill. So anyway, sorry, I got a little worked up there.
Yeah, well, no, I feel you, and you know what? I think we have hope that as much as people want to walk the line that they don't take that last step or plunge into complete madness, but there's definitely plenty of that going on Twitter. Look, Brent, it's good now to have a couple shows under our belt. We've talked about keeping this short. We're under 20 minutes. We've highlighted some interesting things that have happened this week, and I think we can cap this episode with a mic drop on some absolute madness that's been going on. So we'll see what craziness and madness the markets, milkshakes, and Twitter bring us next week, and I look forward to keep doing this with you.
Yeah, if anybody out there listening or watching has some ideas that they want us to talk about, or if they see something that just makes them mad or is maddening or just total madness, send us to us on either over the website or on Twitter or however. And if it makes the cut, we'll mention it on the show.
Yeah, and we've had some good interaction on YouTube. We're tracking those comments, we're engaging with those. So definitely feel, whatever platform is your favorite. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and drop a comment there. We're real easy to find. Although Milkshakes Markets Madness is a show, not a podcast, we're easy to find everywhere with the handle Milkshakes Pod. And the website also is milkshakespod.com. So wherever you are, wherever your preferred digital world of hanging out and seeking madness is, please share it with us. And we look forward to highlighting that on the show here. So we'll see you next week. Brent, thanks so much. And I'll talk to you soon.
Good talking to you. Peace, everybody.
See ya.